The morning was cold and crisp at the Naval Special Warfare training base. New recruits arrived one by one, their uniforms crisp, boots shining, and faces filled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Among them was a young man, eager and confident, ready to prove himself as the best. He had trained hard, pushed himself to the limits, and believed he knew what it took to be a SEAL. Little did he know that this place would test not only his physical strength but also his humility, patience, and respect for others. As he stepped onto the base, he noticed the intensity in the air. Recruits shouted commands to each other. Instructors moved quickly, correcting posture, adjusting gear, and maintaining a strict order. The young man felt a mix of adrenaline and pride. He had imagined this moment for years, dreaming of the challenges and imagining himself excelling effortlessly. He thought he was ready for anything, but the first person he noticed wasn't another recruit. It was one of the instructors, a woman, walking briskly across the training yard with authority in every step. He couldn't help but glance at her, sizing her up, and a small, dismissive smile crossed his face. In his mind, he thought, "She's just another trainer. How hard can this be?" He assumed that because she was female, she might be less strict, less capable. Without realizing it, he let his arrogance show, whispering a quiet joke to the recruit next to him, expecting laughter. That tiny moment, though it seemed insignificant, would mark the beginning of a lesson he would never forget. The female officer, however, noticed everything. Her eyes were sharp, trained to detect even the smallest sign of weakness, hesitation, or disrespect. She didn't flinch at his joke or glance. She didn't respond with anger or scolding. Instead, she maintained a calm, professional demeanor, her face neutral but her presence commanding. Every step she took seemed purposeful, every movement precise. It was clear to anyone watching that she was confident, disciplined, and in complete control of her environment. She had earned this position through years of training, countless missions, and unwavering dedication. The recruit, meanwhile, continued to underestimate her. He walked past her, barely acknowledging her presence, convinced that he already knew better. His overconfidence made him overlook the subtle glances from other recruits, some of whom were watching him with quiet amusement or curiosity. He didn't realize that his attitude was already making him stand out, not as a leader or hero, but as someone naive and arrogant. That morning, the training began with a series of exercises designed to test both physical endurance and mental focus. Recruits ran obstacle courses, carried heavy equipment, and performed complex drills under the watchful eyes of the instructors. The young man tried to show off, sprinting faster, lifting heavier, and attempting to complete tasks ahead of others. But with every action, the female officer observed silently, noting both strengths and weaknesses, and occasionally correcting a subtle mistake without drawing unnecessary attention. There was a moment when the recruit tried to take the lead in a team exercise, expecting praise and admiration. But instead, the officer calmly redirected him, explaining in a clear, firm voice the proper technique and the reason behind it. Her words were concise, leaving no room for argument, yet delivered in a way that commanded respect rather than fear. The young man felt a flicker of irritation. He wasn't used to being corrected, especially by someone he had unconsciously underestimated. Other recruits began to notice the dynamic. Some were impressed by her authority and skill, while others felt inspired to follow her lead. Her calm confidence stood in stark contrast to the recruit's restless energy and brashness. It became obvious that this was not just another instructor. She was someone who demanded and earned respect through her actions and knowledge, not by shouting or asserting dominance. By the end of the morning, the young man started to sense that he might have misjudged her. The exercises, though physically challenging, were also a test of character, teamwork, and adaptability. The female officer's presence was not intimidating in a harsh way. It was commanding in a way that silently said, "I know what I am doing, and I expect you to follow if you want to succeed." He felt a mixture of confusion and begrudging admiration, though he would never admit it out loud. As the recruits lined up to finish the first day, the young man looked at her once more. This time he saw not just an instructor, but a leader with unwavering authority. Her calm gaze met his briefly, and in that silent moment, he felt the first hint that he was about to learn something far more important than physical endurance or combat skills. He was about to learn respect, humility, and the true meaning of leadership, the kind that comes not from ego, but from experience, skill, and integrity. That first day ended with exhaustion, pride, and a subtle shift in perspective. The recruit, still unaware of the full depth of her abilities, carried with him a seed of realization. This was going to be a challenge unlike any he had faced, and the woman he had mocked, though he didn't yet know it fully, was going to play a pivotal role in shaping him into a better soldier and a better person. The female officer moved through the training yard with a quiet confidence that made everyone take notice. To the new recruit, she was still a mystery. Someone to underestimate, perhaps, or someone whose presence he barely acknowledged. But the truth was, she was far more experienced and accomplished than anyone at the base could casually see at first glance. Her reputation had been built over years of hard work, relentless training, and countless challenges that tested not only her body but her mind and spirit. Long before this day, she had been a young officer with the same excitement and determination as the recruits now under her watch. She had started at the bottom, facing grueling physical tests, endless drills, and the skepticism of those around her. Many had doubted her because she was a woman in a field dominated by men. But she had never let doubt or mockery stop her. She trained harder than anyone else, mastering skills that others struggled to learn. Slowly but surely, she earned respect, not through arrogance or threats, but through her competence, precision, and unwavering commitment to excellence. Her record was impressive. She had completed multiple deployments in dangerous regions, handling missions that required both courage and intelligence. She had led teams through high-pressure situations, making split-second decisions that saved lives. Every mission had honed her leadership, teaching her how to remain calm under pressure, think strategically, and inspire those around her. Even when faced with impossible odds, she never let fear or ego take control. Her resilience had become legendary among her peers and superiors. Despite her accomplishments, she never flaunted them. She didn't walk around the base expecting recognition or admiration. Her focus was always on the mission and the people she led. But the new recruit didn't know any of this. From his perspective, she was just a female officer who had appeared suddenly, moving with authority that he didn't understand. In his mind, he assumed experience automatically meant she was older or weaker. He had no idea that she had faced challenges far beyond anything he could imagine, and that every step she took was backed by years of hard-earned skill and discipline. Other recruits whispered about her quietly. Some spoke in awe of her past missions, sharing stories of her bravery and leadership. One recruit mentioned how she had successfully navigated an extremely dangerous situation at sea, saving her team when they were trapped by a sudden storm. Another spoke of a training exercise in which she had outperformed every male officer, completing impossible physical challenges with strength, speed, and precision. These stories made some recruits respect her immediately, while others dismissed them as exaggerations. The new recruit, however, remained skeptical. He wasn't yet ready to believe the rumors or acknowledge her skills. His ego told him that he could handle anything. That experience alone wasn't enough. He thought that when the time came, he would prove himself faster, stronger, and smarter than anyone else. This overconfidence blinded him to the reality of her abilities, and it made him more likely to make mistakes he wouldn't even see coming. Meanwhile, the female officer continued to observe quietly. She didn't need to assert her reputation verbally. Her presence and actions spoke louder than words ever could. Every instruction she gave was precise. Every correction was fair but firm. Her calm demeanor carried authority, and even those who doubted her quickly realized that ignoring her advice would only make their own training harder. She had learned long ago that leadership wasn't about showing off. It was about guiding others, teaching them to be their best, and earning respect through competence, not through intimidation. Her history wasn't just about professional accomplishments. It was also about personal sacrifices. She had spent countless hours away from family, pushed her body to physical limits, and faced criticism that would have made lesser individuals quit. Her strength was not only physical but mental and emotional. She understood pressure, fear, and failure in ways that the recruits could not yet grasp. She had been tested in extreme conditions and had come out stronger every time. The new recruit, oblivious to all this, continued to make small mistakes in his assumptions. He talked casually with peers, questioning her methods silently, convinced that her training style was just standard procedure. What he didn't realize was that her methods were informed by years of experience. Every technique she taught had been tested in life-and-death situations. Every instruction, no matter how small it seemed, had a purpose. By the middle of the day, some of the recruits began to notice the contrast between their expectations and reality. While the young man remained arrogant, others started to admire her authority. Even in minor drills, she demonstrated patience, resilience, and sharp judgment. She corrected mistakes without embarrassment, guided teams efficiently, and maintained control over chaos in a way that commanded respect naturally. Her presence made it clear that she was not someone to be underestimated, and the recruits slowly began to understand that her reputation was real. The new recruit, however, was still resistant. Pride and overconfidence clouded his perception. He believed he could challenge her indirectly, thinking he was clever, while secretly dismissing the whispers about her past. But deep down, a tiny seed of doubt had been planted. Every precise movement, every calm instruction, every silent observation made him wonder. Perhaps she was not just another instructor after all. As the first day drew to a close, the officer remained calm and focused, unaffected by the noise, chaos, and arrogance around her. She had done what she always did. Led with quiet authority, teaching through action, not words. And though the new recruit didn't yet fully understand it, the foundation for a lesson that would change his perspective forever had already been laid. The real test wasn't going to be physical, it was going to challenge his ego, his assumptions, and his understanding of respect, leadership, and true strength. The next morning, the training intensified. The new recruit arrived at the base with his usual confidence, determined to show that he was faster, stronger, and smarter than everyone else. He had spent hours imagining how he would stand out, how the instructors would notice his skills, and how he would earn the respect of his peers. But what he didn't realize was that confidence alone was never enough in this environment. Discipline, humility, and attention to detail mattered far more than ego. The female officer was already there, walking across the training yard with her usual calm precision. She had been observing the recruits from the very start, noting their strengths and weaknesses, understanding how each one responded under pressure. She had a natural ability to see through bravado and ego, to recognize those who relied on skill alone versus those who relied on pride. And she had already noticed the new recruit, who carried himself with a mixture of arrogance and inexperience that was all too common among newcomers. The first exercise of the day was a physically demanding obstacle course. Recruits scrambled over walls, crawled under nets, and swung across ropes with the precision that came from hours of grueling training. The new recruit sprinted ahead, eager to finish first, ignoring instructions and taking dangerous shortcuts. He wanted to impress everyone, particularly the female officer, though he wouldn't admit it. He thought that by being faster than others, he could prove he was superior. But the officer wasn't impressed by speed alone. She watched carefully as the recruit made small mistakes, gripping ropes incorrectly, misjudging distances, and rushing through obstacles without proper form. Every misstep could lead to failure or injury, and she knew that in the real world, mistakes could cost lives. Calmly, she called him back, correcting his form and demonstrating the proper technique. Her voice was firm but not harsh, precise but not overbearing. It carried authority because she had earned it through experience, not because she demanded respect through force. The recruit felt a flash of frustration. He wasn't used to being corrected, especially by someone he had subconsciously dismissed. Pride burned in him, and he muttered under his breath, thinking her instructions were unnecessary. He tried to ignore her advice and continued the course his way. But as the obstacles grew more difficult, he realized that rushing blindly was making things harder, not easier. Every shortcut he had taken slowed him down, caused him to stumble, or forced him to start over. Meanwhile, the female officer moved effortlessly, demonstrating the proper techniques that allowed her to handle challenges efficiently and safely. Other recruits began to notice the difference. Some whispered to each other about how skilled she was, how she seemed to anticipate every move, every mistake, and every problem before it even happened. They watched the new recruit struggle, seeing that confidence alone was not enough to succeed. For the first time, a few of them realized that experience, discipline, and attention to detail mattered more than raw strength or bravado. By the end of the obstacle course, the new recruit was exhausted, physically drained, and increasingly frustrated. He had been so focused on proving himself that he hadn't noticed how much he had learned, even in failure. Every correction, every demonstration, and every observation by the officer had been a lesson, but he hadn't recognized it yet. He felt embarrassed, though he tried to hide it, and his arrogance had begun to crack under the pressure. After the physical drills, they moved on to a team exercise designed to test leadership, decision-making, and teamwork. The recruits were placed in small groups, each responsible for completing a simulated mission under strict conditions. The new recruit immediately tried to take charge, barking orders and assuming that his confidence and knowledge would naturally lead the team to success. He overlooked the subtle instructions given by the female officer, thinking they were unnecessary. The officer allowed the exercise to continue while observing quietly. She knew that leadership could not be taught by telling someone what to do. It had to be experienced. She wanted the recruit to face the consequences of overconfidence, to understand that a true leader listens, observes, and adapts. As the mission progressed, the recruit made small mistakes, miscommunicating with teammates, misjudging distances, and rushing decisions. The team struggled because of his approach, and it became increasingly clear that confidence without guidance and respect for experience could only take someone so far. At one point, the female officer intervened subtly. She didn't yell or embarrass him. Instead, she asked a simple question that made him pause. "Have you considered why this approach isn't working?" Her tone was calm, almost conversational, but the weight of her authority made him stop in his tracks. He realized that his assumptions were flawed and that he had underestimated both the exercise and the person guiding him. The moment was small but significant, a turning point in his understanding that skill, knowledge, and experience mattered far more than ego. By the end of the day, the new recruit's frustration had shifted into reflection. He was exhausted physically, but mentally he began to see the bigger picture. The female officer wasn't just correcting mistakes. She was teaching him lessons about patience, discipline, teamwork, and humility. He had mocked her, dismissed her, and underestimated her. But her quiet authority and expertise had already started to change his perspective. As they lined up to finish the day, the officer gave a brief nod of acknowledgement to each recruit. Her calm, composed presence had left a lasting impression. The new recruit, despite his stubbornness, couldn't help but feel a flicker of respect. He didn't understand it fully yet, but deep down, he knew that this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge not only his body but his pride, his assumptions, and his understanding of what it truly meant to be a SEAL. A few days into the training, the atmosphere at the Naval Special Warfare base was tense but focused. Recruits were learning fast, pushing their bodies and minds to the limits, and the female officer continued to move through the training yard with her quiet authority, correcting mistakes and guiding them with precision. Among all the recruits, one person still struggled the most to accept her authority: the new recruit. His confidence hadn't completely faded, but the lessons he had begun to learn were starting to chip away at his arrogance. That morning, an unexpected event stirred excitement across the base. The Naval Special Warfare Admiral was scheduled to visit. This wasn't a casual visit. He came to observe, to evaluate the effectiveness of the training, and to see how recruits and instructors performed under scrutiny. News of the Admiral's presence spread quickly, and everyone knew that behavior, discipline, and performance were under close observation. The recruits whispered among themselves, imagining how they would impress him, how they might be noticed, and how this could affect their future careers. The new recruit felt a surge of nervous energy. He saw this as the perfect opportunity to prove himself not just to the instructors but also to the Admiral. He was convinced that if he could demonstrate his physical abilities and confidence, he would stand out as a future SEAL. What he didn't anticipate, however, was that the Admiral was also there to observe leadership, teamwork, and respect for authority, qualities that were far more important than raw strength or bravado. When the Admiral arrived, he walked calmly through the training yard, eyes scanning every detail, noting how instructors interacted with recruits, and how the recruits handled both pressure and instruction. His presence brought a different energy to the base. The air seemed heavier, more serious, as though every movement was being measured. The female officer, as usual, moved with composed precision. She didn't change her approach. She continued to instruct and correct the recruits, guiding them quietly but effectively. Her actions spoke louder than words, displaying confidence, competence, and authority that the recruits could not ignore. The new recruit, however, remained focused on impressing the Admiral. He thought that by showing off his speed, strength, and intelligence, he could draw attention and earn recognition. He tried to perform exercises faster, take risks to complete tasks first, and subtly ignore instructions from the female officer. He whispered sarcastic comments to other recruits, trying to appear clever and fearless. His arrogance blinded him to the fact that the Admiral was not only observing physical performance but also evaluating character, discipline, and respect. During a critical drill, the new recruit made a bold move that he thought would impress everyone. He attempted to take the lead in a team exercise, rushing ahead and ignoring the carefully planned instructions. The team struggled to keep up, and small mistakes began to accumulate. The female officer noticed immediately, as she always did, and calmly intervened, correcting errors and guiding the team back on track. She didn't scold him publicly, but her authority was clear and undeniable. The recruits and even the Admiral could see the difference between reckless confidence and measured expertise. At one point, the new recruit made a sarcastic remark about her instructions, assuming the Admiral wouldn't notice. His words, meant to be a subtle jab, were overheard. The Admiral paused, watching the interaction carefully. There was a moment of silence as he observed the officer's calm response. She didn't react with anger or defensiveness. She simply continued her instruction, demonstrating her skill and command. The new recruit felt a sudden tension in the pit of his stomach, though he couldn't yet identify why. Finally, the Admiral approached, stopping beside the female officer. He watched quietly as she guided the team through the final phase of the exercise, correcting mistakes, improving efficiency, and keeping the recruits focused. When the drill ended, he turned slightly and, in a quiet voice that only the new recruit could hear, whispered, "She outranks you." The words struck the young recruit like a sudden shock. He froze, the arrogance leaving him instantly, replaced by a mix of disbelief, embarrassment, and realization. In that moment, everything changed. He had underestimated her, mocked her, and assumed he could act without consequence. But the Admiral's words reminded him of a simple truth. Authority wasn't about ego or arrogance. It was about experience, skill, and earned respect. The female officer's calm authority and competence had been apparent the entire time, but he had been too blinded by his pride to notice. Now, confronted with the undeniable reality of hierarchy and merit, he could no longer deny her superiority. The new recruit began to reflect on his actions. He realized that his overconfidence and impulsive behavior had not only made him look foolish but had also hindered the team's performance. The lesson was harsh but necessary. No matter how strong, fast, or intelligent someone thought they were, true success required respect for those with experience and the ability to follow guidance when needed. As the Admiral continued his visit, the new recruit watched silently, now attentive and cautious. He paid closer attention to every instruction, observed the officer's techniques carefully, and started to recognize the wisdom in her approach. The dynamic of mockery and arrogance had shifted. He no longer saw her as someone to be dismissed but as a leader to be studied and respected. By the end of the day, the atmosphere in the base had subtly changed. The recruits were more disciplined, more focused, and more aware of the weight of experience and authority. The female officer remained calm, composed, and quietly commanding, Her reputation solidified not through intimidation but through her skill, knowledge, and consistent leadership. For the new recruit, the Admiral's whisper would remain a turning point, a lesson in humility that would shape how he approached training, leadership, and respect for those who had earned it. The next few days at the training base were even more intense than before. The new recruit still carried a mix of pride and unease. He had heard the Admiral's words and felt a spark of doubt, but he wasn't ready to admit it fully. Meanwhile, the female officer continued her work, guiding recruits with calm authority. Every movement, every instruction, and every decision she made revealed the depth of her experience. She had faced challenges far more dangerous than any drill could simulate, and it showed in the way she moved with precision, confidence, and clarity. That morning, the instructors announced a high-stakes exercise designed to push the recruits to their limits. It wasn't just about physical strength, it was about strategy, quick thinking, teamwork, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. The recruits would be placed in simulated combat scenarios, navigating a complex course while responding to unexpected challenges. Mistakes could cost the team time, efficiency, or even mission failure in the simulation. The new recruit, still eager to prove himself, assumed he would take the lead again. He thought that by being the fastest and most daring, he could impress both the officers and his peers. He ignored some of the instructions, believing that instinct and speed were more important than careful planning. His confidence was high, but his understanding of strategy was still limited. He was about to learn that leadership required far more than just courage and speed. The exercise began, and chaos quickly followed. Teams moved through the course, encountering obstacles, simulated enemy attacks, and difficult terrain. The new recruit charged ahead, making bold decisions without consulting his team. He thought he was showing leadership, but in reality he was causing confusion. His teammates struggled to keep up, and the efficiency of the group dropped with every impulsive move he made. Meanwhile, the female officer observed from a distance, quietly analyzing each team's actions. She didn't intervene immediately because she wanted the recruits to experience the consequences of their choices. Soon, the scenario escalated. One team faced a simulated critical emergency, where a teammate was trapped and could only be rescued through careful planning and teamwork. The new recruit tried to rush into action alone, thinking his bravery would solve everything. But his plan was flawed. He misjudged distances, overlooked key details, and almost caused the team to fail the exercise. Panic and confusion spread among the recruits. The tension was palpable, and for the first time, the new recruit began to realize that raw confidence could not overcome experience and strategy. At that moment, the female officer stepped in. Calm and focused, she assessed the situation and directed the team efficiently. She moved with precision, giving clear instructions, delegating tasks, and anticipating potential problems. Her decisions were quick but measured, showing both authority and expertise. The trapped teammate was rescued without harm, the simulated mission was brought back on track, and the entire group learned firsthand the power of skilled leadership. The new recruit watched in stunned silence. For the first time, he truly saw her abilities in action. She wasn't just giving orders. She was analyzing, planning, and leading under pressure, all while keeping her composure. Her actions demonstrated exactly why she had earned respect, why she had risen through the ranks, and why the Admiral had whispered those unforgettable words to him days before. He realized that all his prior assumptions, about her being just another instructor, about women not being as capable, were completely wrong. After the exercise, the team gathered to debrief. The female officer explained every decision she had made, the reasoning behind each action, and the critical lessons that the recruits needed to understand. Her explanations were clear and insightful, revealing the depth of her knowledge. The new recruit listened, absorbing every word, though his pride made it hard to admit that he had underestimated her. He started to understand that leadership wasn't about showing off. It was about skill, strategy, and the ability to guide others under pressure. As the day progressed, he began to reflect on his own performance. He realized that his impulsiveness and arrogance had almost jeopardized the mission. He had been so focused on impressing others that he had ignored teamwork, ignored strategy, and ignored the guidance of someone far more experienced than him. It was a humbling moment, a turning point in his understanding of what it truly meant to be a SEAL. The female officer didn't scold him harshly. Instead, she provided constructive feedback, pointing out where he had gone wrong and how he could improve. She treated him with respect, even though he had mocked her in the past, showing that true leadership also meant patience and the willingness to mentor others. The new recruit felt a mix of emotions: embarrassment, awe, and a growing respect for her that he could no longer ignore. By the end of the day, the recruits were exhausted but wiser. The high-stakes exercise had shown them the importance of preparation, teamwork, and listening to experienced leaders. The new recruit, in particular, felt a shift inside himself. The arrogance that had defined his arrival was fading, replaced by humility and a desire to learn. He now saw the female officer not as someone to mock, but as a mentor whose experience and skill could shape him into a better soldier. That evening, as the recruits rested and reflected on the day, the new recruit stayed awake longer than most. He replayed the events in his mind, the mistakes he had made, the lessons he had learned, and the way she had handled every challenge effortlessly. For the first time, he truly understood that being a SEAL wasn't just about strength or speed. It was about discipline, strategy, teamwork, and the quiet power of earned respect. This exercise, more than any physical challenge, had become a defining moment. It marked the point where he began to shed his ego and start the journey toward genuine growth. And for the female officer, it was another day of demonstrating why true leadership commands respect, not through fear or loud authority, but through skill, composure, and unwavering competence. The days at the Naval Special Warfare base were growing even more intense. Every recruit was being pushed harder than ever before, physically, mentally, and emotionally. The new recruit had already experienced moments that humbled him, but he was still struggling to fully accept the authority of the female officer. Pride and stubbornness remained strong inside him, and he was determined to prove that he could handle any challenge on his own. Yet, deep down, a small seed of respect had begun to grow, quietly challenging his arrogance. On this particular day, the instructors announced a complex, multi-stage exercise that required leadership, quick decision-making, and teamwork. The recruits were divided into squads, each responsible for completing a series of simulated missions. The exercises were realistic and high-pressure, designed to replicate the challenges faced in real-world operations. Every decision mattered, every mistake could cost time or risk failure, and every move would be closely observed by the instructors and indirectly by the Admiral. The new recruit immediately tried to assert himself as a leader. He gave orders quickly, expecting compliance, and assumed that his confidence and strength would naturally make him the authority figure. He ignored subtle guidance from the female officer, believing that following her instructions would make him appear weak or unskilled. He underestimated the importance of observation, strategy, and careful planning, qualities the officer had mastered through years of experience. The exercise began, and chaos quickly spread among the teams. Obstacles, simulated threats, and time constraints tested everyone's ability to adapt. The new recruit's squad struggled because of his impulsive decisions. Teammates hesitated, instructions were unclear, and errors started piling up. The female officer watched quietly, assessing the situation with calm precision. She didn't immediately correct the recruit, because she knew he needed to face the consequences of overconfidence. Real-world leadership, she understood, required experience gained through both success and failure. As the exercise reached its critical phase, the new recruit made a risky move that he thought would demonstrate bravery. He acted without consulting his team, misjudged a maneuver, and nearly caused a major failure in the simulation. Panic and confusion erupted around him. It was a tense moment, enough to make even the most confident recruit reconsider their approach. At that moment, the female officer stepped in. She moved calmly but decisively, guiding the team back on track. Her instructions were precise, her corrections subtle but effective, and her presence immediately restored order. She didn't shout or berate the new recruit publicly. Instead, she used her expertise to redirect him and the team. She demonstrated that true leadership was not about ego or bravado, but about skill, patience, and the ability to inspire and guide others under pressure. The new recruit froze as he watched her in action. For the first time, he felt the weight of her authority, not through fear, but through competence and calm control. Every move she made showed why she had risen through the ranks, why her decisions were respected, and why she commanded loyalty without needing to demand it. It was a silent but powerful lesson that he could no longer ignore. The Admiral, who had been observing the exercise from a distance, finally approached at the critical moment. He had been watching the dynamics unfold, noting not only the physical performance of the recruits but also their respect for authority and teamwork. He stopped near the female officer and the new recruit, his eyes sharp and assessing. The new recruit, thinking he might be able to explain or justify his behavior, found himself suddenly unsure. The confidence that had carried him through previous drills was faltering in the face of real authority and experience. Then the moment came. The Admiral leaned slightly toward the recruit and whispered, "She outranks you." The words were quiet, meant for the recruit's ears alone, but they carried immense weight. The young man froze instantly. Pride and arrogance were replaced by shock, embarrassment, and the dawning realization that he had misjudged her completely. He understood, perhaps for the first time, that authority and respect were earned through skill, experience, and leadership, not through ego or bravado. The whisper changed everything. The recruit felt a mixture of fear and awe. He reflected on every mistake he had made, every moment he had mocked or underestimated her. He realized that he had been blind to her experience, to the years she had spent honing her skills, and to the countless missions she had successfully completed. The female officer's calm demeanor, her precise instructions, and her ability to lead under pressure were all evidence of her earned authority. The rest of the exercise continued, but the recruit's perspective had shifted. He no longer saw her as someone to dismiss or mock. He now recognized her as a leader, a mentor, and someone whose guidance could teach him how to become a better soldier. He began to follow her instructions carefully, observing how she made decisions, how she communicated with the team, and how she maintained composure even under extreme stress. Each observation was a lesson in leadership and respect. By the end of the day, the recruit was exhausted, both physically and mentally. But something had changed inside him. He understood that the challenges he faced weren't just about strength or courage. They were about learning to listen, to respect experience, and to lead with wisdom rather than ego. The Admiral's whisper was a turning point that he would carry with him forever. A reminder that humility, discipline, and respect were just as important as any physical skill. As the recruits gathered to debrief, the female officer gave guidance and feedback calmly and thoughtfully. The new recruit listened attentively, no longer trying to argue or assert dominance. He was learning slowly that her authority was not something to be challenged. It was something to respect, understand, and emulate. That day marked a crucial turning point, where arrogance began to give way to humility, and where true lessons in leadership and respect started to take root in his mind and heart. After the Admiral's visit and his quiet but powerful words, the atmosphere at the Naval Special Warfare base began to shift for the new recruit. For the first time, he started to see the female officer not just as an instructor or authority figure, but as someone who could truly teach him how to become a better SEAL. He had spent so long relying on confidence and physical ability, thinking that ego and bravado could carry him through challenges. But now he realized that true success required humility, discipline, and respect for experience. At the start of the next week, the female officer began taking a more active role in mentoring the new recruit. She didn't single him out to embarrass him, but she guided him carefully, correcting mistakes, showing techniques, and explaining strategies. Her approach was firm but patient, demonstrating that leadership wasn't about shouting orders. It was about teaching, inspiring, and bringing out the best in those around her. The new recruit found himself listening in a way he never had before, paying attention to every word and gesture, trying to absorb everything he could. During physical drills, she would quietly observe him, noting where he hesitated, where he rushed, and where he relied too much on instinct instead of skill. Each correction was a small lesson in discipline. She emphasized teamwork over individual glory, strategy over raw strength, and patience over impulsiveness. The new recruit began to see that the mistakes he had made in the past were not simply about physical performance. They were about mindset, about understanding his own limits, and about learning to rely on the expertise of others when necessary. One day, during a team navigation exercise, the recruits were tasked with moving through a complex course under simulated combat conditions. The new recruit instinctively tried to take the lead, but the female officer called him aside quietly. "Leadership isn't about rushing ahead," she said calmly. "It's about knowing when to act and when to listen. You can't do it alone. You need your team, and you need to understand their strengths and weaknesses." Her words struck him deeply. He realized that in his desire to impress others, he had ignored the people around him, undermining teamwork and jeopardizing missions. Under her guidance, the new recruit began to approach training differently. He slowed down, observed more, and started asking questions instead of assuming he knew the best way. He began to see the value of strategy, the importance of preparation, and the strength that came from discipline. For the first time, he understood that his actions affected not just himself, but the entire team. His attitude began to shift from arrogance to humility, from self-centeredness to awareness, and from impulsive decisions to thoughtful planning. Other recruits noticed the change as well. Those who had once admired him for his boldness now saw a new side. A recruit who was learning, adapting, and willing to be guided. Slowly, respect for the female officer grew among the entire group. Her quiet strength and expert leadership became a model for everyone, showing that authority was not about yelling or asserting dominance, but about competence, consistency, and the ability to inspire others. The new recruit also began to reflect on his own actions during the Admiral's visit and the high-stakes exercises. He realized that his earlier arrogance had caused tension, mistakes, and missed opportunities for his team. The female officer had not only corrected him but had also shown him how to grow, how to transform failure into a learning experience, and how to lead with integrity. This realization was humbling, but it also sparked determination. He wanted to improve, to rise to her level, and to earn the respect of his peers through skill and discipline, not bravado. Over the following days, the recruit's progress became visible. He listened intently during drills, followed instructions carefully, and began contributing thoughtfully to team exercises. He still made mistakes. He was human, after all, but each error was an opportunity to learn rather than a blow to his ego. The female officer guided him patiently, showing him how to adjust, adapt, and think critically. Slowly, he began to understand that respect was earned, not demanded, and that true leadership required patience, wisdom, and skill. The relationship between them evolved into one of mentorship. The recruit started asking questions, seeking advice, and observing her closely. He noticed the subtle ways she managed her team, handled stress, and maintained focus in difficult situations. Her calm authority was not intimidating, it was empowering. He began to feel inspired, not just by her strength but by her ability to teach, guide, and uplift those around her. He realized that following her example would make him a better soldier and a better teammate. By the end of the week, the recruit had transformed in small but significant ways. He was no longer the arrogant, self-centered newcomer. He had started to embrace teamwork, respect for authority, and the value of learning from experience. His peers began to notice the change, and the atmosphere in his squad shifted as well. Under the guidance of the female officer, the group became more disciplined, efficient, and cohesive. Her mentorship had not only improved one recruit but had positively influenced the entire team. For the new recruit, the lessons went beyond drills and exercises. He began to understand that being a SEAL was about more than physical strength. It was about character, discipline, and integrity. He realized that the challenges he faced were shaping him not just as a soldier, but as a person. The female officer had become a guide, a mentor, and an example of the kind of leader he wanted to become. He no longer mocked her, doubted her, or underestimated her. Instead, he observed, learned, and applied the lessons she imparted with patience, humility, and determination. This period marked the beginning of a profound transformation. The recruit's arrogance faded, replaced by respect, attentiveness, and a willingness to grow. Under the female officer's mentorship, he learned that leadership was earned through skill, experience, and the ability to guide others, not through ego or bravado. The foundation for the final stages of his growth, and for the ultimate recognition of her authority, had been firmly established, setting the stage for the last critical lessons that would shape him into a true SEAL. By the final week of training, the base had a very different atmosphere than when the new recruit first arrived. The early days of arrogance, mockery, and overconfidence were long behind him. He had learned, sometimes painfully, that leadership, respect, and skill mattered far more than ego. The female officer, who had once been the subject of his ridicule, had become his guide, his mentor, and the person he now looked up to with genuine respect. The final exercise was announced, a culmination of everything the recruits had learned over weeks of grueling drills, obstacle courses, and simulated missions. This exercise was designed to test not only physical strength and endurance but also teamwork, strategy, leadership, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Each recruit would be evaluated individually and as part of their teams. Success required coordination, careful planning, and the application of lessons learned from both triumphs and failures. The new recruit approached the exercise with a changed mindset. Gone was the reckless confidence that had once driven him to rush ahead without thinking. In its place was careful observation, thoughtful planning, and a willingness to follow guidance when necessary. He no longer sought to prove himself through bravado. Instead, he wanted to succeed through skill, discipline, and teamwork. He understood that the respect he now had for the female officer was a key part of his growth. Her leadership had shown him the path, but it was up to him to walk it. As the exercise began, the recruit took note of his team, assigning tasks based on their strengths, communicating clearly, and anticipating potential challenges. The female officer observed quietly from a distance, watching the subtle changes in his behavior. She didn't intervene unless absolutely necessary, allowing him to demonstrate the growth that had taken place over the past weeks. The other recruits were impressed. They noticed that the once arrogant young man had become methodical, disciplined, and effective. During a particularly challenging part of the course, a simulated emergency occurred. One team member faced a critical injury scenario, requiring quick thinking and precise action. The new recruit stepped forward, guiding his team calmly and efficiently. He applied strategies he had learned from the female officer, delegating tasks, communicating clearly, and maintaining composure under pressure. This was a stark contrast to his earlier behavior, when he would have rushed recklessly and caused confusion. His team executed the rescue flawlessly, thanks to his careful leadership and the lessons he had absorbed. The female officer approached after the exercise, her presence calm and composed as always. She evaluated his performance, noting the improvements and growth he had achieved. The new recruit felt a surge of pride. Not the pride of arrogance, but the quiet pride that comes from genuine accomplishment and personal development. He realized that he had earned her respect through effort, humility, and the willingness to learn. In front of the entire training group, the female officer addressed the recruits. She praised the team for their performance but also highlighted the growth of individuals, particularly the new recruit. She explained how he had transformed from someone focused on self-glory to someone who understood teamwork, strategy, and leadership. Her words carried weight, and everyone listened closely. The new recruit felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the recognition was not about ego, but about real achievement. Other recruits approached him, acknowledging the change they had seen. They admired his transformation, noting how he had applied the lessons learned under her mentorship. The new recruit, once dismissive and arrogant, now humbly accepted their praise, aware that his growth had been guided by someone far more experienced. The female officer's influence had not only helped him succeed, but had also set an example for the entire group about the power of mentorship and leadership. That evening, as the recruits rested, the new recruit reflected on the journey. He remembered his first day, when he had laughed at her, dismissing her authority and underestimating her skill. He remembered the moments of frustration, the Admiral's whisper, the intense drills, and the exercises that humbled him. He realized how far he had come, from arrogance to humility, from mockery to respect, from impulsive confidence to measured leadership. Each lesson had shaped him, and each challenge had taught him the true meaning of being a SEAL. The female officer remained a steady presence, guiding not just him, but all recruits, showing that leadership is not about intimidation, but about skill, patience, and integrity. She had proven that respect is earned through action, not demanded through words. For the new recruit, her guidance had been transformative. He now understood that authority and experience were invaluable, and that true leadership meant serving others, mentoring them, and inspiring them to be their best. By the end of the training program, the recruits were recognized for their achievements, but the new recruit felt that his greatest accomplishment was not a medal or praise. It was the growth he had achieved under the mentorship of the female officer. He had learned humility, discipline, and respect, and had begun to embody the qualities that defined a true SEAL. He now approached his future challenges with confidence tempered by wisdom, understanding that ego and arrogance were obstacles to real success. As the recruits stood together one last time, the female officer looked at him with a nod of approval, a silent acknowledgement of his transformation. He returned the gesture, no longer with arrogance or mockery, but with respect, gratitude, and a determination to carry forward the lessons he had learned. The journey that began with laughter and underestimation had ended with growth, understanding, and the realization that true leadership comes from skill, experience, and the ability to guide others with integrity. The story concluded with a sense of completion, showing that the new recruit had not only earned the respect of his peers and mentors, but had also discovered the true essence of leadership. The female officer's mentorship had been the catalyst for this transformation, proving that patience, skill, and quiet authority could change even the most arrogant individual into a disciplined, respectful, and capable leader.